Robert Kubica is officially a Formula One race driver again. In 2019, he'll be back on the grid with Williams. It's a story a lot of fans have been waiting for. There's been quite a lot of speculation about who would get that final Williams seat, and it is resolved. Kubica joins George Russell on the grid at Williams as the team really looks to bounce back from a terrible 2018 season. I've got F1 racing editor Ben Anderson and Autosport Plus editor Alex Kalinauckas with me to discuss the news and find out a bit more about what's gone on and how we've got to this point. So Ben, we'll start with you. Kubica tried to get the Williams race drive last year, didn't quite work out, but he stayed with the team and now he is a race driver. But there's a bit more to it than that. How did Williams end up making this decision?
I think by a process of elimination, really. I mean, if we rewind slightly, the original plan was to have Stroll and Sirotkin for another season at least. Stroll was on, I believe, a 3-year deal when he first joined Williams for 17. Obviously, the Stroll family is decamped to Racing Point Force India. The money goes there. We expect that Lance will follow next season. Sirotkin was signed on a multi-year agreement, probably one of these 1+1. We have an option, see how it goes arrangements. And the team were quite pleased with that. But obviously things have developed there as well, and it seems that SMP aren't so happy with the way things have gone with Williams' car performance, with the development. Depending on who you believe, one side or the other has decided to terminate that arrangement, so he's off, and Kubica is kind of the next in line. He's been hanging around the team, he's obviously been reserve driver, he wanted the race seat, but Sirotkin was picked over him, so now the way is opened and he's in. I think Williams probably would have chosen Esteban Ocon if they could, but we know the team is in slight financial difficulty, can't find the sponsor to facilitate that deal. So Kubica, with his Polish backing, is in.
Yeah, that's the thing. He has managed to find the money to make this deal happen. We can't ignore that fact. How would you expect him to perform in the car next year? Because you mentioned Sirotkin there. Sirotkin and Kubica effectively had a shootout last year for the drive, and by some accounts, Sirotkin was faster. So what have Williams seen in Kubica perhaps to change their perception that maybe he wasn't good enough last year?
Well, I think that those doubts still remain. Okay. I think Sirotkin proved himself to be the quicker of the drivers in that test. Obviously, he's had more running this year than Kubica by virtue of being the race driver. Kubica's had some running. There's still some doubt over Kubica's pure pace. He's missing a few tenths. Maybe he will find that extra pace with more running and being the race driver, but the jury's out. I don't think that he is ultimately the first choice. He's in there, again, as I said, because of this process of elimination. What we wait to see is whether with the extra running and a bit more knowledge about the Pirelli tyres, he admitted when he did that Abu Dhabi test last year that it was like starting again, and all the experience he had previously on the tyres was almost irrelevant. So it's whether all that he's lacking is that bit of knowledge, or whether everything he's been through, the time he's been out of Formula One, just means he is the slower driver than he was previously.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. That if any driver was out of F1 for the period that he has been, if they'd gone and done a little bit of rallying but not that much competitive motorsport, you'd expect them to potentially lose a bit of sharpness. Alex, we've been running a poll on the Autosport Twitter account this week about asking them fans which driver out of Kubica and Russell is going to come out on top next year, and it's been a comfortable victory for Kubica. He's a very popular driver and a very highly rated driver, of course, and not that many people yet will know perhaps what George is capable of. You've covered Russell in the junior categories, you know what he's all about. Would Kubica's fans be wrong to underestimate the young Brit?
I think they would. Yeah, I covered him last year in GP3, and he's a very determined character. He's the sort of guy where he sets himself goals and targets, and he works hard, and he does achieve them. I know he went to Macau, I think at the end of 2016, with the idea of we've got to get some sort of something to be able to sell to potential backers, sponsors, whatever. He went, he got pole, and he was able to say when Mercedes came calling, or he went to Mercedes, look, I got that, I can deliver for you, and that was instrumental in him ending up on their junior scheme. Then he turned up in GP3 after a few disappointing seasons in F3, but won the rookie championship. He's gone into F2. He's leading the championship as a rookie, so he's following in the footsteps of another very highly rated young driver, Charles Leclerc, who obviously is now going to Ferrari next year. So yeah, he has all the qualities to be able to succeed next year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is the lead, not the lead driver in terms of leading the team, but maybe the driver who is going to get the more eye-catching results.
Do you think that's fair, Ben? You talked of Kubica potentially still missing a few temps. Is that the sort of thing that a driver as prodigious as Russell could possibly exploit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kubica will lead the team on the engineering side. I mean, one of the aspects that has got Kubica this seat beyond, the financial backing is that Williams are enthused by his attitude. He has got a great reputation. He is very experienced. He does have engineering savvy. He's brilliant in the sim, and many teams in Formula One have seen Kubica on the sim firsthand and been impressed. So early on, Kubica will be the focal point just because Russell is a rookie. But because of this pace that Kubica's missing, because of his limitations, he's not been able to fully overcome them yet. There is that question mark. And Russell, although he doesn't have F1 experience, and we never know how a driver really will get on until they actually step up, but everything we've seen so far suggests that he's a precocious talent. And I do expect that as the season goes on, it will be Russell and not Kubica who will be the dominant force in that team.
It's going to be fascinating to follow. Let's go back to something you mentioned earlier about Sirotkin's backers, SMP Racing. Straight after Williams confirmed Kubica, there was a statement from SMP saying it was their decision to walk away. We understand that Williams are claiming that's not true. So we've got both sides effectively claiming they were the ones that decided to end the deal and part ways. Which side do you fall on? I mean, can we believe one side over the other?
It's always difficult, isn't it? Because without being part of the negotiations and how everything played out, you can never really say. And sometimes both parties can be right and both parties can be wrong at the same time. But if I had to pick a camp, I'd probably side with the Sirotkin camp. Only because, as I said earlier, that whole deal was arranged on a multi-year basis. They were very enthused by Sirotkin, his attitude, his performance in the car versus Kubica. At the Abu Dhabi test last year. He's done fine in the car this year. That SMP money was solid, and Williams in their current situation, they would want that money to be there. It seems like SMP didn't want to continue, and on that basis, Kubica wasn't really in the. It didn't seem to be in the frame for the race seat until other things started to unravel. But that said, if Kubica's backers were able to kind of match what SMP were offering, then it's fair enough that Williams could claim, well, then you're just picking between two drivers with equal backing and who's more keen. And if the SMP camp was starting to get itchy feet, or maybe they wanted to negotiate the deal down because they weren't happy with the performance of the team, but Kubica's camp we just want to be in the car, we don't care that this year's been bad, then you could maybe argue that Williams just switched and maybe while they were playing both sides and then decided, oh no, actually Kubica's the one we're going to go for. And in that instance, you could say, well, it was Williams' call.
Alex, SMP were quite specific in the reasons they gave. They talked about, I think they called the performance of the car an unpleasant surprise, and then they said the development rate of the team this year was disappointing. Nobody can argue that. Williams are at the back now firmly. Does that maybe add some credibility to what SMP are claiming?
There's no doubt Williams have been very, very underwhelming this year. But I saw that release land and I thought, it's almost like the breakup of a relationship where you're just going, no, I dumped her or I dumped him, when it's actually the other way around. And I just thought, just because someone said something doesn't make it true.